Ibn Taymiyya's legal limits. Now there's this question of whether Ibn Taymiyya is a Sufi himself, and this is the last part of my presentation. The American scholar, as I said before, the American scholar George Makdisi argued in a 1973 article that Ibn Taymiyya is a Sufi of the Qadiriyya order, named after Abdul Qadir Jilani. So what was Makdisi's evidence? A lot of it is external evidence, not to Ibn Taymiyya himself. Okay, so the first thing is Makdisi presented spiritual initiation chains, or chain of silsila, chain of sheikhs that led up to Ibn Taymiyya, and this tied back to the Hanbali Sufi Abdul Qadir Jilani, after whom the Hanbali, or rather after whom the Qadiriyya Sufi order is named. Makdisi also found two statements in which Ibn Taymiyya is reported to have said that he donned the Sufi cloak, the khirqa. He took on the khirqa of Abdul Qadir. Now, donning the cloak is an initiation ritual into a Sufi chain of spiritual authority. Another thing that Makdisi mentions is that Ibn Taymiyya calls Abdul Qadir our Sheikh in a commentary on a treatise Abdul Qadir wrote, Abdul Qadir Jilani. And then Makdisi also notes that Ibn Taymiyya was buried in a Sufi cemetery. So it seems that he would be perhaps a Sufi. Now, Makdisi's claim is sometimes repeated as established fact in both academic and popular writing. However, several scholars have cast serious doubt on Makdisi's evidence. The spiritual initiation chains and the statements about donning the Sufi cloak do not appear in Ibn Taymiyya's own texts. Okay, these are texts around in the 14th century, around Ibn Taymiyya and after Ibn Taymiyya lived, that talk about these things. So, as a general matter of fact, initiation chains are often forged. So these particular chains can be forged as well. The cloak donning statements, donning the khirqa, could also have been forged. Ibn Taymiyya himself criticizes this practice, so how would he let himself be the subject of it? And there's also no evidence in his corpus that he participated in it as well. What about him mentioning Abdul Qadir as our sheikh in the commentary on Abdul Qadir's work? The problem here is there's nothing more about Ibn Taymiyya being a Sufi or really affirming Abdul Qadir as a Sufi sheikh in that particular treatise. Another thing, it's not even clear there was such a thing as a Qadiriyya order, Sufi order at the time of Ibn Taymiyya that you could join, because the Qadiriyya order did not just emerge with Abdul Qadir Jilani. It took quite a while to form. So, yeah, he may not have been able to join that order. What might not have been established well enough yet to join. Finally, Ibn Taymiyya didn't call himself a Sufi. We have no evidence that he calls himself a Sufi. And the significance of being buried in a Sufi cemetery is not clear. It could be that his family, as I mentioned earlier, he was engaged in Sufi activities. Maybe it was the family cemetery. So, Makdisi's case is not built on that solid of evidence. But despite this, as I just hinted, it seems reasonable to suggest that Ibn Taymiyya did participate in organized Sufism in his early years, and perhaps he, as I said, emerged within a Sufi context, a Sufi family, or his Hanbali family participated in Sufi activities of various kinds. We also saw earlier that he witnessed the Sufi dhikr in Sama' sessions as a young man. He was well acquainted with shrine religion, and he acknowledges openly that he accepted traveling to graves to visit them before he deemed it a religious innovation. So he had a bit of a conversion on that point. And he even appreciated reading Ibn al-Arabi's works until he was 40 years old, which is quite a late age, all considered. So given all of this, it is apparent that Ibn Taymiyya grew up and came to intellectual maturity in a Sufi environment. Ibn Taymiyya likely participated in some Sufi and shrine rituals early on in his life, but it's very unlikely that he participated in such activities in his later years, especially given his sharp criticism of spiritual concerts and shrine religion. He also had grown very wary of the ecstatic aspects of religion that are usually thought to be central to Sufism. So it goes too far, I think, to call Ibn Taymiyya Sufi in the usual sense of the term. If Ibn Taymiyya is to be called a Sufi, it must be strictly according to his own vision of a highly ethicized spirituality, a spirituality prescribed by the revealed law. Thank you.